Yoche vasasatam jive dosilo asamahito ekahang jivitang seyo silavantasa jayeno. From Dhammapada Verse, the verses on the thousands. Even if someone were to live for 100 years, but unvirtuous, unethically, and with a scattered mind, without meditation, without samadhi, it would be better to live even just a single day virtuous, meditating and attaining samadhi. And you just have made the commitment to 5 precepts or even 8 precepts. And when we live up to that, if we not only make the commitment, but if we live up to that even just for a single day in combination with meditation, with samadhi, the Buddha pointed out that this is already better than living even 100 years and just creating bad karma by not keeping precepts and hurting and harming others, living unethically and with a mind which is scattered, not focused, not concentrated, not calm. And I'm mentioning that because I feel very concerned that right now there is such an emphasis on pure quantity of life. The Gatha I quoted, the verse I quoted, and there's actually a whole series of 5 such verses. The Buddha in each one points out even a long life of 100 years is inferior to even a very short time of being virtuous, meditating, developing samadhi, developing wisdom, putting forth spiritual effort, the effort to purify one's mind, the effort to not hurt or harm either oneself or any other beings, the effort to abandon defilements like anger, greed, hatred, delusion, the effort to develop qualities like loving kindness and compassion, like sympathetic joy and equanimity, like wisdom, insight, understanding. Now, this is all more important. Now, there's more to life than just being alive. Now, the crucial question is, how do we live our life? Because this life is just one of many. And I think one reason that we see in our society and in the present crisis that we have such a strange emphasis only on length of life, preserving life almost at any cost it appears, is the wrong view that there is only this life. Then it would maybe make a little bit more sense if there was simply nothing once we die. Obviously you want to stretch it as long as possible, but this is not the case. And what we call death is simply a transition to the next life. Now, unless someone attains the total freedom of nibbana, the deathless element, but for all the others, it is a transition simply to the next life. And what the next life and the next and the following ones will be like is determined by how we live this life, what kind of karma we make how impure or pure our mind is. Now, this is what determines the quality of our next life. That is the reason that it's so much more important how we live our life than how long we live our life. Because if we live just one day, as the Buddha said, truly virtuous and truly developing samadhi or effort or wisdom or insight, the results in our next rebirth would be fully worth it to lose quantity of life in this one. If we preserve our virtue, if we continue meditating, and then we happen to die early, but we are reborn, for example, in Devaloka, with a lifespan which is reckoned in the millions of years in human counting, and we can immediately see what is the loss of a couple of years in human life. Even if we are reborn as a human in a good human life with good karma, and even then the calculation will make sense. Of course, in most cases, there's not a decision about being virtuous, developing samadhi and wisdom, and dying very regularly. Being virtuous and making good karma in this life, and may even extend our lifespan in this life. So in practice, we are not usually put in front of this alternative, whether we have to be either virtuous and developing meditation, but dying quickly and then having a good rebirth, or the opposite. Most of the times, it's actually a win-win situation, and by being virtuous and developing samadhi and insight, we may even extend our lifespan because there's so much good karma, and some of that may take effect even in this life. So normally it's a win-win, and we are not forced to choose between these. But it's still an important statement of the Buddha, in principle, even if normally this is not the choice we have to make. Just hypothetically, if we had to make the choice between a short life of Dhamma practice or a very long life of hurting and harming others and increasing the dust, the pollution and impurity in our own mind. If we ever had to choose between that, then the short life, but the wholesome one, is by far the better one. So there's no reason for us not to be afraid of any virus, because there's no reason for us to be afraid of death. We do know that death is simply a transition to the next life, and if we can preserve not just these two things which you committed to today, faith, confidence, conviction, trust in the Triple Gem, and your virtue, your precepts, then you're basically already guaranteed a very happy rebirth. So what we should worry about as true Dhamma practitioners is that we are losing these things, that we may be losing our faith, our conviction, our confidence in Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. This would be a true catastrophe, Because if we lose it in this life, we may not get into contact in the next life. We may lose a contact to the Triple Gem, to Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha for many, many future lifetimes. And this would be really serious. And similar, if we commit serious transgressions of our precepts, if we are acting unvirtuous, unethically, harming ourselves and others, if we may be reborn in the so-called subhuman realms, as an animal, as a hungry ghost, even in hell. It's very difficult to get out once we are in any of these states of deprivation. Very hard, so difficult to make good karma there, so difficult to come out again and become a human or a deva again. So this would be a real disaster. This is what we should be afraid of. But most people are not afraid of that. Most people are not afraid of drinking, they even enjoy it, drinking alcohol. Most people are not afraid, or many people are not afraid of other drugs and intoxicants and consuming them. Some people even say sometimes one should lie. They're not afraid of lying. They may enjoy breaking the third precept. They're not afraid. Some are not afraid of stealing, and some consider killing a pastime, like hunting and fishing and so on. But this is a real danger. On the other hand, everyone is so afraid right now of a virus which in the worst affected country has killed about 0.6% of the population, that is Peru. To the best of my knowledge, the highest casualty figures have been in Peru, and it's about 0.6% of the population. And that is skewed very heavily towards people who are very elderly or having pre-existing conditions. So in most other countries, and in particular if one is not yet very old and doesn't have pre-existing conditions, the risk is vastly, vastly lower. But everything in our society seems to be focused only on that. Now, I'm not soft-pedaling anything for sure. Any person who died from coronavirus is a tragedy for that person and for the loved ones. But at the same time, it's also unfair not to consider all the other people who have died, and that is a vast majority. In all countries, even the worst affected, in the last 1.5 years since that started, the vast majority of people who have died did not die from coronavirus. So why do we have this artificial emphasis only on a particular minority of the dead, completely disregarding the vast majority? Why do we have such an excessive emphasis where our whole life is designed around not dying from coronavirus or not getting it, when we have a much bigger danger of, for example, losing our faith in the Triple Gem, of committing harmful karma that may cause us a rebirth in the states of deprivation. So as Dhamma practitioners, I think it's important that we get the priorities right. And this is why I quoted that teaching of the Buddha. As I mentioned, and normally there's no choice like this. It's not like in order to practice Dhamma, you have to live very short and die young. In most cases, the Dhamma practice has a tendency to even expand our lifespan. Because making good karma can take effect already in this very life. In particular, if we start early in life and continue, then when we get older, a lot of the karma we are making in this life is already coming back and taking effect. It's not something that is only coming in the next life. A lot is already experienced in this life. So very regularly, by being virtuous, by making good karma through generosity and kindness and compassion, by developing virtue and precepts, by developing calm, focus, concentration, wisdom and insight. By doing that, we tend to increase our lifespan already in this life. And I can see that actually quite a few of these outstanding Kuba Ajahns, although they often lived quite a dangerous life with many physical deprivations, and many of them still got very old. And one reason is often that they made good karma in past lives, and they also made lots of good karma in this life. And this may have already extended their lifespan right here in the same life. So normally we don't have to choose. It's not normally necessary to die early in order to practice. The default position is that we are practicing, and that even increases our lifespan. But the Buddha made this statement to get the principle across. If we ever had to choose, then it's not about quantity. It's about quality of life. And the highest quality of life is the Dhamma practice. Purifying one's mind, not harming other beings, not harming oneself, developing qualities like gratitude and respect to those who deserve it, looking after one's parents. And I'm feeling very concerned that this is sometimes made impossible for people. It's part of being a human being that one looks after parents. This is part of our humanity. And when we are prohibited and it's made impossible for us to do that, we are losing part of our humanity, not only in the Buddhist sense, but to my knowledge in all religions. It is part of being a human being that we can bury our parents, our loved ones, our spouses, our children, our parents, and so on. And if we're very concerned if that is made impossible for people to do, because it's part of our humanity. It's our duty not to look after elderly, in particular parents, but all elderly. And I'm very alarmed and distraught that this is being made impossible in many instances. It is not only about quantity of life, and I think many of the elderly actually, they point that out themselves. And I think many elderly, if they have a choice of living another 2 years in complete isolation, this is recognized generally as a form of torture, total isolation, even in prisons. and there have been lawsuits and acknowledgement of that, and that one can't do that, and even with felons in prison. One cannot totally isolate them for unlimited times. And what I hear, there's elderly people who say, it doesn't make any sense for me if I live longer and my life is being preserved. But I'm completely cut off from any contact with my loved ones. They're not happy with that themselves. And they might be willing to take a risk of dying rather than being isolated. So the way I understand that verse is a clear, unambiguous statement of the Buddha that life is not just about quantity. The more important part of life is the quality. And the way the Buddha defines quality here is by spiritual practice. That is the one thing that truly gives the quality to life. That is the highest quality to life we can have. So it is really important that we sustain our spiritual practice, because that is what gives the highest possible quality to our life. And I'm not sure how others feel, but if I wasn't able to do spiritual practice anymore, one loses the whole deeper meaning of life. So it's so important that we maintain our spiritual practice, whatever are the circumstance. I feel very concerned that people can't come to the monastery. From our side, as monks, you're still having enough support. People still can drop off some food for us, so we are materially well looked after. And we have now our fellow monks, and we are living here in nature. And so I'm in a totally privileged position. And the monks tend to be a lot in solitary practice anyhow. But I'm fully aware now how important it is to so many Buddhists, to so many of our supporters, to come to the monastery and being able to have contact with the Sangha, being in this environment and the energy and having the Buddha statue here and doing the practice of generosity and offering and giving and paying respects and listening to Dhamma in the direct presence of the monks, and I'm feeling very concerned when that can't happen. So life is not just about quantity, but life is about quality. And what really gives quality to our life is being able to practice the Dhamma. Now, fortunately, a lot of our Dhamma practice is internally. So I'm hopeful, I trust that you can maintain your Dhamma practice even if you are cut off from direct contact with the monks. Now, this is why we are doing things like the live videos, why we are doing the audio podcast. Now, my concern is that people don't lose too much quality of life. And again, quality of life for me is a life where you can practice virtue, where you can practice good karma, generosity, where you can practice sense restraint, samadhi, wisdom, insight. And my main concern is that we can maintain that and sustain that. And if we can maintain and sustain our spiritual practice, no matter what the external conditions, then we shouldn't be too afraid about dying. And we shouldn't be too afraid, in particular, about a still very small chance of dying. Even in the oldest age group, to my knowledge, even if one does catch the coronavirus, it is still better than half-half. So even in the worst case scenarios, it's not yet a true death sentence. And for all the others, the chances are still fairly small. So this is not the real danger for a Dhamma practitioner, whether we might catch this virus. The real danger for a Dhamma practitioner is if we lose the quality of life, where we don't practice anymore, where we can't unfold and cultivate our spiritual practice. That should be our number one concern. So my hope is that this video, this audio podcast, the little ceremony, even if our chanting is not the most perfect, even if we had some technical problems, the main thing is we're trying our very best to make sure that we maintain our quality of life. And quality of life defined as being able to practice the Dhamma, being able to purify our heart from defilements, being able to practice loving kindness and compassion, being able to practice sympathetic joy and equanimity, being able to contemplate the Four Noble Truths, being able to contemplate the three characteristics, that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent and ultimately unsatisfactory, and that all phenomena at all are not a self. So if we are afraid of anything, then please let us be afraid that we are losing our virtue or our faith. If you want to be afraid of anything, please don't be afraid of a virus, but be afraid that you can maintain your purity of sila. I have that here, the ottappa, sometimes translated as moral fear. You can also call it shame, conscience. Have that fear that we are losing our faith, our conviction in the Triple Gem. That would be a real danger. But as long as we can maintain our virtue, as long as we can maintain our faith, trust and confidence in the Buddha, as long as we can continue on the path of purification and unfolding the Noble Eightfold Path to abandon greed, hatred and delusion, and as long as we can encourage others to do that and practice that together, then there's nothing we have to be really afraid of.